Hi, so Heledd here from Rothley Law, and I am delighted to be joined this afternoon by Team Chroma, who I'll let them tell you about themselves in a moment. We've got Daniel Thomas, Emma D'Souza, and Madeleine sadly is having tech issues. So if you're watching this, we're very sorry. She had made huge efforts to come on, and poor thing has not managed to do so. So without further ado, Daniel, you're first on my screen. So would you like to tell us about yourself and pass over to Emma?
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm Daniel Thomas. I'm a music therapist by profession, qualified about 23 years ago, and co-founder and managing director of Chroma. Chroma is a national organisation. We provide art, drama, and music therapy services across the health, education, and social care sector. So obviously, lots of work with people in the medico-legal sector, and then adopted children and young people, and loads of work we do in schools with whatever schools are dealing with. So that's us. Emma, your turn.
Hi, I'm an art therapist and I've been working for Chroma since just before lockdown, I think. So a few years now, which is great. And yeah, before that, working lots with children in creative capacity.
And I'm Madeleine. I'm a drama therapist. I qualified in 2013, and I've been working with Chroma since around 2019. I've done a lot of adoption work with Chroma. I'm moving into the medical legal sector as well.
Endlessly fascinating, even before we've really started. So thank you for that. So fantastic introduction there. So can we talk about drama therapy and art therapy? What is it for the uninitiated?
Well, art therapy, so as a creative process, and as the name describes, it's all kinds of art. You don't have to be, an artistic or think that you're creative. Lots of it's about sensory, um, action and expression. And with the art therapist, the client can express themselves through that creative means, sometimes when words are really difficult or maybe unavailable. So it's a good way for them to express themselves. And also it can be really enjoyable. So there's a reduction of stress and anxiety and enjoyment, which as you know, it allows people to engage in other activities as well because they feel a positive sense of self.
Fantastic.
Um,
And
Drama therapy.
please.
So drama therapy is a form of psychotherapy that specifically uses drama and theatre to work with clients. And within that, that includes characters, story, play as the main sort of intentionally used, sorry. Um, One of the sort of inherent things about drama therapy is what it gives us is what we call the dramatic distance. So for a client, similar to what Emma was saying about, if words are not available, for a client who, for example, is working with loss, we're working with loss or trauma, um, having the dramatic distance between the client and a character or a story or a metaphor means that gives us that there's a sort of inbuilt safety there for clients to
Mm.
explore their material. So it works really well with lots of clients across lots of client groups.
That's a really lovely description of both of those modalities. And I think, with Chroma, we're always really focused on making a difference around the client's breakfast table or on the bus or, on the way to school.
Mm.
And, you know, there's a lot of work that we can do, as Madeleine said, around the psychological, side of how someone is doing, grief, loss, sense of self. But also, drama therapy, if you think about return to work, vocational rehab, we can do that sort of psychological work and then actually do some role play, for example, about a job interview. We're going to practice this
Yeah.
loads and loads because you're going to have to deal with sweaty hands and a beating heart because, that's part of a job interview. Or I'd like to, go to a cafe and feel comfortable in a cafe environment. So in drama therapy, it really gives the client the opportunity to put that therapy process into real life.
Mhm.
Um, And I often think with, with art therapy, very, very strong modality around, again, the expressive side. Enjoyment is such a powerful tool. But depending on, Emma's conversations with the MDT, the physio may say, I'm also trying to, work with that client around reaching out. So Emma just places the art materials just slightly out of reach. So the client has to, flex their arm, has to reach out and grip and grab. So able to be very conscious of MDT goals around, functional things as well as psychological and expressive. I think it all binds together really well.
When you say MDT, who would you expect to be on that team or that group?
Should I? Well, so I think hopefully with the team working around the client, there will be connection to everybody working. So as Daniel said, the physical side with the physiotherapists, the lots of art materials are very sensorial, good for fine motor grip, gross motor skills. We've got squeezy bottles and brushes and clay and using brush strokes or drawing. So all of those things are really helpful. And also link with occupational therapy, the social aspect as well. Sometimes it's really supports community within maybe the rehabilitation space or in the home. Sometimes it helps connect family members together and communication with the people that are around them, living with the clients, which is really lovely. There's a shared experience which develops self-expression, which is really important. I would like to give an example of one of my clients really struggled with their left side. Their physiotherapy had reached a plateau, and they were thinking of ways within the team to help him, sort of encourage him to use that part of his body. And when he came to the sessions, it was always very inert, very still. He never really wanted to use it. But as he became more and more engaged in the art making and conversation and enjoying sort of making the things that he enjoyed, he started to unconsciously move his arm and he used it in a sort of very natural way and he developed kind of movements through that. So that was a really good way to see the progress and how art therapy can help open doors to, moving forward with the therapy plan.
And you sort of say, I think picked up at the sort of first said play, and you might think, is that just children? But I'm understanding and hearing that could be anything on the age range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be playful, can't we?
Definitely.
I think actually that's an interesting thing I've seen with working with either older young people or adults is that in life we do kind of tend to move away from play. We think it is for kids. And I think in the therapy space, if you've established a therapeutic relationship and you have a client who trusts and feels safe within your sessions, actually there's something really magical about play in that environment. And I think that all the creative arts therapies actually, but certainly in drama therapy, in my experience, if you can play, then you tend to sort of get back in touch with what's going on inside, if that makes sense. So again, I'm coming back to a little bit to the psychological impact of things, but that sort of accessing what's inside through something as simple as play. And I think that enables clients then to work and to explore whatever it is that they've been through or that they're going through.
And I think, Heledd, coming back on to what you said about who would be in the MDT that we, liaise with. Obviously, Emma mentioned physiotherapists, OTs, speech and language therapists, neuropsychologists, great, great sort of role, great person to link with. And, what we're not going to come and do is just come in and create, let's have an art outcome just for the sake of it. It's not about teaching you to be a painter or teaching you to be an actor. It's always those non-artistic goals, the ones that make a difference around, as I said earlier, around the breakfast table, that give back a sense of independence, agency, choice, control, that I think have a real rippling effect through that person's life. It's, I say this carefully, but it's always super easy to make a good outcome in the therapy room, but that's not where that benefit needs to show up. It's everywhere else in that client's life. So
I think as well, when the work is client led, you're following the client, so you're working at their pace, you're working at their ability. It's not a set program that has to be a particular, we have to do this, this, and this within our therapy session. But by keeping the clients at the heart of it, I think what Dan's talking about, that ripple out effect, is that they are at the heart of the work that certainly that I do, which means that then when they feel different or they feel change within the sessions within themselves, then that supports that kind of ripple out effect as well.
Okay, I like the idea of stuff being around the breakfast table on the bus because, as you say, you've been injured in whatever guise. There will have been a clinical intervention. You will have ended up in the system, such as it is. And there's that almost shock. There's that not only is the injury shock to the system, there's the shock to the system of being in an institution such as the NHS, which is a behemoth. And sort of having been a patient myself, you get institutionalized very quickly. Is what I sort of I realised. It's really only gone in for sort of a short period, but actually you get very used to people doing things for you. And so I really like the idea that actually this is taking it out of that sort of not just clinical, NHS clinical, but perhaps that sort of very things being done for you because it's just quicker and easier to do it for you because we need to move on to the next person. So actually getting it out of that space, I think that's a really interesting way that you're bringing this to life.
We get to hold that space for the client to have their own agency and their own choice. Like you say, that's not always possible within the system, which is, it's a lovely way for us to work. And also it's lovely for the client's family to see what they can do. And that can lead to their perception also, which is lovely to see.
It's a
And
really
also,
positive. Oh, sorry, Madeleine.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to add to that. I was just, being alongside someone as they reclaim agency as well, which is what you are as a therapist in the space with them, because the client's stories don't end with the injury, do they? They then change and they grow and they develop. And again, like back to what Dan was saying about, rehearsing things. If you think in terms of acting or theatre, you start at kind of point A and you rehearse and you practice and you develop and you refine and then you get to point B. So I think being alongside the client as they sort of change the narrative of their story is really important part of drama therapy and all arts therapies, I think.
And would you do all three therapies with one client, or would you seek to tailor to the person in front of you, or would you just see which one they adapt to best?
In my work, I would bring with me a lot of materials that are a mix. So I would bring art materials. I might bring a musical instrument, but my core is drama therapy. So it would be using the other elements, but within drama therapy. So, for example, bring it back to a story, and we might we might draw the character first, or I might draw the character. The client might describe what character they want, and I might draw that character, and then we might try and bring that character to life. So it definitely taps into other materials, but it isn't. I don't do art therapy, even if my client spends an entire time drawing. I wouldn't. That's not me doing art therapy. So. But definitely using different different elements is important because again, if it's client led, the client may feel more able to play tambourine, or they may feel more able to in the beginning as we start working to draw something out rather than kind of act. When you say drama therapy, clients sometimes very quickly say, I can't act. And there's a sort of a fear there that you're going to expect in sort of the first session for them to be, performing. So it is about It's about working with what the client can work with, but ultimately bringing it back to drama therapy for me.
Yeah, and that's certainly from a sort of Chroma point of view, our referral process with case managers, with deputies and litigators is very much trying to identify um, what the real life goals are that we're trying to work towards, and then identifying, the suitability of a modality, art, drama, or music therapy. Um, we definitely would not say you should have all of them at the same time. If it's a psychological outcome, it could be either, music, art, or drama therapy. If it was potentially something like, learning to re-walk, we may, say that should be music therapy because rhythm is the active ingredient. But coming back to, what Madeleine was saying, drama therapy is embodied. It's using the body. So there's lots of opportunity to do some physical rehabilitation within, drama therapy as well. But that's part of our relationship with case managers and legal people, just to identify what we're actually trying to work towards and then which of the modalities is most suitable.
You just mentioned case managers, and if you're in this world, case manager, you'll know what it is. For those perhaps not so ingrained, how does a case manager come into being, and how do you then work with them?
I think case manager is just such an important relationship in terms of our therapists and our, referrals team. They are at the center of, I think, a wheel, along with the client, very much alongside them, as Madeleine said, getting alongside, working towards things. So, we have to align ourselves with them. We learn from them. They obviously can be an OT or a music therapist, even physiotherapist, and it's just making sure that we understand what the whole team, the MDT, is working towards, and how best that we can, support that going forward.
What got you into this, each of you? I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Specifically into medical legal.
Yeah.
I think, interestingly, I think for a long time I didn't consider whether it was necessarily something for drama therapy. I think this is something that I've learned, and I've come because as I said, my kind of primary experience is adoption work, and so when I started to think about what I do and the clients that I work with, what is it that they are dealing with and living with, and the key things are things like trauma, loss, identity, all the sorts of things that work across, sort of transfer across to medical legal as well. So I think that changed my view about how useful drama therapy could be in this sector as well. Because I think that, if I think about my client, my medical legal client that I've just finished working with, he was quite young, and he had medically he was okay now, but he'd been left with some scarring, and he'd been left with things that he could no longer do because they needed to protect his head, and make sure that he didn't get any injury or get into any sort of knocked or anything like that. And he'd always been very into sport and rugby, so this is a loss for him. He's very young, and suddenly he can't do the things that he loved before. So in working with him, we did play a lot of sport, actually, and it's interesting because at moments you do think, is this drama therapy? But actually, what he was doing was the sport that he could play, and that he wanted me to play as well, that I couldn't play. This gave him the opportunity to show how good he can be at something. So he's working through what he's lost before by working on being better at something that he can do. And in terms of it being drama therapy, what he was able to do was he was able to be the director in our sessions. So he could direct me to do the things that he wanted me to do. And that helps. That helps with confidence. It helps with self-esteem. It helps with managing the kind of feeling of my understanding that he had, that he's now, not the same as he was, even though he kind of appears to be the same as he was. It's a really interesting kind of what's the word? It's what I'm trying to say is I think that he could have been a client from my adoption work. I think that what he was working through, what we were processing, what he was doing is managing and processing the loss, the trauma, and how his life is now changed because of those things. So I think that means that, why can't I work in the medical legal sector? Because those things that we're working with on a psychological level, we're working with across different client groups.
I'd like to come back to the adoption point, but Emma, can we? What got you into this?
Well, I think, Madeleine has covered quite a lot there, which I totally agree with. And I think there is an absolute crossover because, because we're client led and again, as Madeleine said before, the client is at the heart of our work. And it's an amazing privilege to be able to work with such a variety of people, especially in the medical legal world. It's not a one kind of person, nobody is. And so, for example, I've got one client who's, a young person, a young girl, and she's very active. And that's really interesting work and quite busy and full and creative and messy. And then an older client who is also messy and active, but they're very different people, but they still are stepping into this identity of being in this world and working out what they can do, not what they can't do, and that there's a space for them to sort of, that there's no judgment and acceptance, and that's really important for, really being able to step into that new identity. And those are the bits I really enjoy.
I think as well, the importance, just again, I think to what Emma just said about, the non-judgmental space, and it's with any client, you're building a therapeutic relationship. So again, it doesn't that can be for any, that has to be there, but with any client, the key to starting and exploring and working is building that therapeutic relationship. And that can be done in any way, in different ways. And yeah, so I think that's also something that means, if you can do that with one client, I think then you can use those skills, that experience to do that with another client.
I like this sort of creating and stepping out into a new identity concept. Because I suppose whatever the reason you're involved, it's what that forward is, isn't it? Daniel, what got you into it?
Well, so I came out of sort of working with clients in about 2016. I'd done lots of work with teenagers with autism on the more sort of severe end, and then spent a long time in special schools working with children who were sort of labeled profound and multiple learning difficulties. So often, well, all of them will have had an injury at birth, not through medical negligence, just through, quote, really bad luck. And I sort of say that carefully. So, sustaining brain injuries, did a lot of work with kids with cerebral palsy. And for me, my passion is that I think great therapy and great business, to put it, that way, is all about really great relationships, but between the MDT, between the instructing parties, the families. And I think as therapists, and certainly creative arts therapists, we have so much capacity and skill in working with people who find making relationships quite difficult because of what's happened to them. We've got a conference coming up on I think it's the 11th of October, and part of what I'm going to be talking about there is a model that I'm working on that tries to sort of quantify the fact that relational investing in that sort of therapeutic relationship, that causes clinical excellence. Because you can have great processes, you can have a great piece of technology equipment, but it's the human relationship that makes the client that you're working with, feel that they are at the center of their rehab journey. And I think this model, looking at sort of relationally invested clinical excellence, I think that is fundamentally what the creative arts therapies do. And hopefully, if I with colleagues can start to quantify that, it will really, again, push the understanding of what the arts therapies can bring, within the medical legal sector, as well as the work we do with schools and with adopted children and young people and their families.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on that adoption point. So that's quite a big difference in how you can approach. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong. So somebody who's come to you through an adoption route would need different approaches to somebody who's come with a brain injury. Talk to me about that.
Certainly different approaches. I mean, I'll hand over to either Emma or Madeleine, but certainly in terms of the referral, it would normally be the post-adoption social worker. We work very closely with regional adoption agencies. It's the Department for Education that sort of have a ring-fenced fund that has been supporting that for about 10 years now. So it's the social worker that's supporting the family that comes to us. But then I'll hand over to Emma and Madeleine to sort of describe that work, really.
I think we would have similar to the MDT, we would have a network. And so there would be the family, whoever that might be in the family, might be parents, might be a special guardian, might be a foster carer, there'd be the social worker, possibly the school, there might be a Senko or a teacher, or somebody that had a pastoral leader that had a connection with the child. And so to work with everybody and get everybody on the same page, and also explain what we do, that's really important. And then set up, space and time to be able to do the therapy and keep in contact with everybody and make sure everybody knows what's happening and speaking to them. I think so that's similar in working, and the objectives and goals you would work out with the client if possible, and the family, which is really important.
Yeah. And I would say as well that if I think about some of the clients in the adoption work, they may have FASD, they may have maybe neurodivergent. There may be other things that are not necessarily the same, but it's again, I guess it's back to what Emma said originally about everybody being different, everybody being different, and I think the probably what are similar, what are the same, is that again with an adoption client, you would be working with trauma and attachment and loss and identity. Those would be there, even if your aim was to build self-confidence and self-esteem, for example, if that was one of your aims. You're working with those things on a psychological level. So physically, it may be different work, but I think on the psychological level, it's essentially the same. It's trauma, or it's loss, or it's change.
And how does that come across with family dynamics? Because I think all of this work that we work with patient, client, individual, but they never come in isolation, do they?
No.
So what are you seeing with the sort of supporting cast with all of this? How does that work in your world?
I would say that varies. I think sometimes you have families who are very on board, you have parents who are very on board, and Chroma, of course, as part of our package with the adoption work, is that we offer support to parents as well. So you can as I say, you have sometimes parents who are very, very on board and very sort of want to be part of it and want to be included in, and some who just want to kind of leave you to it and just be updated or brought in, or some who are just struggling very much and actually just need some help with that. And so what we do in terms of the work that we do in the sessions, when we see that change, when we see the difference that, you know, if you're working with a child and they are feeling better about themselves, they're feeling better about where they are and who they are, that translates, I think, back to what Dan was saying around the kitchen table. That is, you know, families see that, they respond differently to parents, and parents then respond differently to them. And so you do see that change. And I think parents, in my experience, it doesn't often take very much change within the client in terms of how they interact with their parents for parents to feel a lot better about it, because they can see, you know, they can see some difference and some change. And I think that's one of the kind of most complete bits about the work, I think, within adoption, is when you are working with a client and you are working with parents and you can see that there are kind of good outcomes for both. Yeah, that's one of the kind of best things about it when it works that way.
Are there any family breakdown in relations? Do you see that, or is that something hopefully you can help avoid?
I think, you know, that can happen a lot, and sometimes we work with the client and the parent or parents together, and sometimes that can be, as Madeleine said, it could be a short piece of work, and people can sort of come back together and feel that safe space to be together and work together. And because they're working in creative spaces, again, they're like, I think, like Madeleine said, dramatic distance, and the same in sort of the art space as well, and the music, that there's a shared goal and aim and respect. And I think that can really help with the family dynamics, bring people, you know, together, and also give each other space. Sometimes the parent just needs to be heard.
Yeah.
And the client needs to be heard, and that's, you know, your facilitation in the middle of that.
I would say as well, if you were in a situation where there was risk of placement breakdown, I think you really need to bring the whole MDT in. There needs to be you know, if you're working with a child and, you know, what support are they getting at school? What what extra support might there be? What other services can we bring in? How much can the social worker be involved? How much can parents get support? You know, if what we're offering isn't enough for parents, is there more that they can access, so that you're part of this team? And I've, in my experience, where it's felt like there was a potential risk of placement breakdown, it really is important to just bring everybody together. And what that is something that we do, and that is something I really feel proud of us that we do really well. We don't kind of think this is just us and we're in there just doing this sort of, you know, we're saving the day or anything like that. We're part of this team. We're part of the whole picture. So it is really important that it's all brought together at those, particularly at times like that, I think.
And what would you like to see? I mean, in your respective fields with therapy, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you want out there for people?
I would want drama therapy available to everybody. Absolutely everybody. And all the arts therapies, because I do think that we have been, certainly at times in the past, seen as a kind of you know, oh, it's a bit of drama. Is it a drama class? Well, that'll be nice. Rather than actually, no, we are, you know, we are a psychotherapy. We happen to use creative arts techniques to do the work that we do. And when we do that because we know it works, you know, we can see it works. And I think I would like everybody to be able to experience it.
Lovely.
Yeah. I think and using the creative arts therapies to help people find their voice is really powerful. And I think that's really important when people don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And certainly, Heledd, coming back to the sort of the medico-legal sector, we and a couple of other organisations over the last 10 or 12 years, I think, have really changed the conversation about music, art and drama therapy from, as Madeleine was saying, that sort of nice to have, maybe slightly weird, oh, what's this? Is it, drama class? Is it acting, or is it a painting class? Into being right at the core of the MDT, along with everything else, much more part of standard care. The creative arts therapies are NHS professions. We're regulated by the same organisation, HCPC, that do psychologists and OTs and speech and language therapists. And I think, that changing the conversation about the creative arts therapies over the last 11, 12 years that Chroma has been around has now given us confidence within music therapy to launch the UK's only expert witness service around music therapy. I think what I'd love to see over the next 5 years is that we had the confidence to bring expert witness services around art and drama therapy and link, like I said initially, or one of the things I've said, to link drama therapy to vocational rehab and be able to say, look, there's a demonstrable effect here, an economic factor. Yes, you're spending money on drama therapy, but that's going to help that person get back to some sort of meaningful occupation, whether that is paid work or volunteering. And we can just start to see, people feeling, wow, I can make a contribution with my taxes. That's part of, being, feeling economically part of the system. Heledd, you were saying earlier, we are all part of a system and we can't really do too much about it. But feeling like you have agency and control and you are making a contribution that's valuable. So that would certainly be my hope around, the medico-legal world and Chroma, just to establish expert witness services across all three modalities, not just music therapy.
Changing the conversation is really powerful, I think. I think that's going to be my takeaway from this. The more we can talk about these things, the more we can sort of encourage people to think about it and not think in linear boxes.
We've got this lovely, we've got this lovely thing about Ask Cath, and Cath stands for Can Arts Therapies Help? So just ask Cath, ask yourself, Cath. Because it's often that, solicitors, case managers, whoever, they go, oh yeah, we've got OT or we've got physio, brilliant, we've done it. And just say, ask Cath, just ask yourself that question, can the arts therapies help?
And I think on that note, we will leave it there. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.